Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 49 of the Primetime Rundown interview series powered by StreamYard right here on the Eastern Observer, I-95 Sports Network, and Zingo Television, Channel 198. We can't thank all of you enough for tuning in and making us a part of your Monday evening. We also want to wish all of those watching or listening tonight a very happy new year, as tonight's show marks our first episode of the Primetime Rundown interview series in the year 2021. That being said, we are thrilled to usher in the new year of the interview series with the play-by-play man for the NBA G League's Long Island Nets and someone I've had the pleasure to know for quite some time, Kevin Dexter. Kevin, thank you for coming on this evening.
Ian, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Happy to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you. And before we get started, we do invite our viewers to join the conversation. So if you have any questions at any time during the show tonight for Kevin, we ask that you please just drop them right into the comment box, and we'll hope to get to them at some point during the duration of the evening. And also a reminder that tonight's interview is available for download on Apple and Google Podcasts, or you can subscribe to the Primetime Rundown on either Spotify or iHeartRadio and listen in that way as well. Kevin, first of all, Happy New Year to you. I know it's been a little while since we actually physically last saw each other, but while most of us couldn't wait to turn the calendar to 2021, it was some year for you. Not only did you and your wife have to endure the COVID-19 pandemic, you became a father, you became a homeowner on Long Island. First of all, congratulations on both counts, but just to become a dad so many months ago in the thick of the pandemic, what is these last 7, 8, 9 months been for you?
Thank you. It's really been difficult at times, different, but I think enjoyable in other ways. I try to look at it as positively as possible. And, anything in life as positively as possible. And I think because, as terrible as the pandemic has been and as terrible as it's been all around the world, it's afforded, me a lot more time at home, which was great, before my wife had our daughter, because we were able to spend, those last few months together. There was just the two of us. And then, since having my daughter, it's been great to be able to spend so much time at home, the three of us, and I get to be around so much more. My wife has gone back to work, but she works from home. So that's great. That we can both be here. I only have to leave the house, very infrequently now to go to work. I do a lot of stuff from home. Like I said, she works from home. So I think, the positive of it has been that we get to spend so much time at home, which has been great. She's almost 6 months now. It's been, obviously, like any new parent, tiring and stressful at times, but it's been a lot of fun. And like I said, I'm glad that this situation, looking at the positive of it, has afforded us so much more time at home to spend with her and get to see her grow up. So it's great.
And I believe her name is Addison Joan, right?
Yes, Addison. Yep.
Well, first off, congratulations, Kevin, to you and your family on, even though she's only 6 months old now, still on the new bundle of joy. And I'm sure it's just you still got to be taking in the feelings a little bit of being a new dad, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Learning new things every day that you don't know. And I think the coolest thing, as you know, and anybody who has kids know, seeing those little things that are yours, like the little traits that are like, oh, that she looks like me here, or she looks like my wife here, or she does something, as she's starting, now she's old enough, she's starting to get a little bit of a personality. And she does some things that, remind us of, myself or my wife. So I think that's one of the cool parts of it too.
Hopefully all good things, Kevin, I hope.
Oh, of course.
Well, I'm sure as Addison grows up, you're going to let her know about your story and where you grew up. And it's really not a far drive for you from where you grew up, because you're originally from Long Island and specifically in the Levittown area. And when you tell your daughter about the story of how you came to where you are today, we all have a start, right, Kevin? So tell me, for you, describe a little bit of your childhood growing up and what really grew your love of sports, because we all have to have a start somewhere.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint, a specific moment or memory. I'm an only child, so I had a lot of, I guess, free time, if you will. I haven't had friends, but just, a lot of time entertaining yourself and trying to figure out different, ways to kind of play alone, right? And I think that's where a little bit of my wanting to become a broadcaster came from. I remember ever since I was 5 years old, I was a little kid, and I would want to put the games on mute on TV and announce the starting lineups. That's kind of where it started. going to a game and thinking that like the PA announcer was the cool part, or the guys, announcing the game on TV was the cool part. I always, I wanted to play, and I was an athlete growing up, but not, this was always kind of what I wanted to do. And I think, going back to just trying to entertain myself, I would, if I was shooting hoops in front of my house at the basketball hoop, in my head, I would be kind of doing play-by-play of it, right? Or pretending I was on Sports Center while I was doing it. So I think that's kind of just where it stemmed from. Like I said, I was an athlete and a pretty good basketball player, and it just came down to me deciding, what did I want to do? Did I want to pursue playing basketball in college? Not that I really would have played at that high of a level, but, Division III, and play for 4 years, or did I want to pursue broadcasting? And, like I said, that was just kind of within me for most of my youth. And I just decided to go that route. And obviously it's been great so far. So
I was going to say, as a lifelong Islanders fan, at 5 years old, are you trying to get out the words to say like Oleg Kvasha? Like what are you trying to get out at 5 years old?
Kvasha I was a little bit older than 5 for Kvasha. But, no, it's actually funny. I should have sent, this is one picture, I have it on my phone. I should have sent you this picture. So and it was not like, my dad is a sports fan, but he's not like obsessive like I am. I mean, he's an Islander season ticket holder. But he watches a lot, watches every Islander game, but other than that, he watches football, but not like religiously like I do. He'll turn a game on if it's on, but he wasn't like somebody that forced me into, watching sports. Mm-hmm. I guess it just kind of came and a lot with the Islanders, as you mentioned. I grew up 10 minutes from the Coliseum, and my dad worked for a company when I was a little kid in the terrible Islander years, the Fisherman era, in the mid 90s, that he had season tickets and nobody wanted to go to the games. The company did. So he took me, and we lucked out, and I got to go for, from those like 95 through 98, 99, I got to go to pretty much every game that, my mom would let us go to.
The good old Brian Berard and Ziggy Palmer years, right?
So anyway, the picture that I was talking about was in preschool. I had to make like a plate in which I drew the Islanders on there, and it's Darius Kasparaitis and Tommy Sallow, I think, or Tommy Soderstrom is the goalie, and Ziggy Palffy and Scott LaChance, if you remember any of his names from, like 95, 96. And I was in, preschool making this, plate, and my mom still has it at her house. So I guess it's a long way of saying, I was, it was kind of that, going to games as a young kid that just kind of, sparked the interest, and getting lucky that I was able to go, all the time because the team was so bad. And I didn't know the difference. I was just enjoying being with my dad and watching the game and learning about hockey. So, that all kind of sparked something in me, I guess.
It seems like from what you're saying that sports wasn't such a growing religion in your house, and you kind of, maybe with the exception of the Islanders and occasional football, you built yourself up to be the sports fan that you are today. So I know we still got to get into your career, but I still want to stay here for a second, because even for me growing up, like I had just, an idol that I looked up to that happened to be a Mets, Giants, and Rangers fan. So for you, was it just kind of like you turned on the TV and the Knicks and Nets were on, or the Mets and Yankees were on, or whatever it was? Is that kind of how you just, fell in love with the game?
Yeah. I mean, my dad is a Met fan. I don't really have, I grew up when I was a kid, I liked the Yankees because they were awesome when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, which is, hard not to. But my dad was never, the only thing he ever really pushed me towards was being an Islander fan. And I feel like I have the same attitude with my kids. That's like the team that I'm the most, passionate about. And that will be, if they want to be a whatever, they want to be a Baltimore Ravens fan, sure. It doesn't really, that's kind of like the one thing. So I guess to answer your question, sports were just always on. I was just obsessed with SportsCenter and whatever as a kid, but I've never really had the conversation with my parents. Oh, did you purposely put sports on? But I guess it was what I liked. I guess I just took a liking to it. And like I said, as an only child, that was what I was interested in. People kind of laugh, obviously The Last Dance, we were all watching it over the summer, right? So I was born in 91. So I remember watching like the tail end of the Jordan Bulls. And people are like, oh, you weren't watching basketball when you were 7. And I'm like, no, I was. Like, I was just that kid who was interested. I still watched cartoons and stuff, but I was just, for whatever reason, I didn't understand it the way, like, watching that documentary helped me understand it more. Sure. But I remember being 7 years old and watching the Bulls in the 90s, or Shaq and Kobe a couple of years later, where some kids don't really pick it up, I guess, until they're a little bit older.
So you have the vivid memory of Jordan crossing over Byron Russell in the finals.
Yeah, I remember. Yes, I remember watching that. I guess I was about to turn 7, right? 98. Yeah. So, wow. Yeah.
And I was going to ask that Addison, I'm sure, has her own personalized Barzal jersey by now at 6 months.
She has a couple of Islander outfits with her name on it. No jersey yet. We'll wait till she gets a little older. But yeah, and she has like a zip up. My dad bought her a zip up, almost like a snowsuit kind of thing, that when we go out for walks, when it's cold out, it's got the Islander logo on it. So she can get warm and still represent at the same time.
So there's no way to turn her over as a Ranger fan in that family.
No way. Sorry.
So getting back on track, Kevin, you had said it already that broadcast was where you wanted to be, and you pursued your passion immediately, and you stayed close to home in the process by attending such a well-renowned broadcast school at Hofstra. So aside from the school's reputation as a great broadcast school, but even more so that you wanted to get into the broadcast journalism business at such a young age, what drove, I don't want to say like what drove your passion, because you kind of answered it, but what drove your passion to really take on that field once you got to college at Hofstra?
It's weird because I'm very much a person who likes to plan ahead a lot. And for the most part, I didn't really have much of a plan other than that I wanted to do broadcasting. Mm-hmm. I went to Hofstra mostly I wanted to stay home. If the true answer, I wanted to stay home. I knew obviously it had a broadcasting program, and that's what I wanted to study. But the main reason was I didn't really want to go away to school, like we talked about. I didn't want to go away and play basketball, and Hofstra just kind of fit those two things. Hey, it had broadcasting. Hey, it was close to home. I didn't want to go away. I kind of stumbled across, I didn't really know as much about the program. Like, I knew that I could study it, and I was like, oh, hey, they have a radio station. Let me go apply. It wasn't like this grand thing. I'm going to Hofstra just to work at WRHU.
Sure.
I applied my freshman year. I got into the radio station, took the training course. And then, I just kind of, by being there that summer, mostly was where I kind of took a big step, I think, freshman year, because I was down the block and everybody went home for the summer, and I was able to go to the radio station and, put in for the shows and the games and whatever it was. And that helped me really kind of, get to the top, I guess, of my class, and then really kind of set the tone for me to be able to do so much while I was there.
You ultimately spent all but 5 months of your undergraduate career working as a play-by-play announcer throughout your entire tenure at Hofstra. So when you first got on that mic, even though all this time, all this lead up, like, you had no real in-game experience. So for you, the first time you got on that mic, did you have any nerves at all?
Oh, of course. Of course. And I tell the kids all the time that I teach, and I know we'll probably get to this, that I teach at Hofstra now. Teenagers, a program for teenagers. But I tell these kids all the time, like, you're so much further ahead than I was, or really any of us that do the teaching were. Like I said, I just had this is what I want to do, but I wasn't, looking back, knowing what I know now, I'm like, hey, I could have been doing all of this stuff when I was 15, 16. I mean, I was just playing, shooting hoops in front of my house, pretending I was on SportsCenter. I wasn't doing play-by-play. So yeah, I mean, I was very nervous, and I still have some clips, from very early on, and it was terrible. Absolutely terrible. But it was fun. It was nerve-wracking, but it was also fun. And I guess that's just what kept coming back. There was never a moment where I was like, oh, this is too much. It was just, hey, how do I learn more? Okay, I want to try this. I want to try that. And getting the taste. My first broadcast was women's lacrosse my freshman year, where I did color for Hofstra women's lacrosse at Stony Brook. And I think I did play-by-play maybe for baseball, by the end of that spring. And like I said, it just kind of, then I was there for the summer and just kind of took off and into sophomore year. And, for those 3 years, I did so much and had so many opportunities, which was awesome.
You had mentioned already that you shot hoops in your driveway. You just had a strong passion. You played basketball you played varsity basketball at your high school, but you also had a strong passion for hockey. So did you model, the way that you came into being a play-by-play announcer? Did you try to model your calls based on maybe somebody else's that you grew up idolizing?
Not one specific broadcaster. I mean, all the names of people that, were big or have been big, I guess have kind of influenced me, in the last, when I was growing up. Like, I can't say that it's specifically one person. I mean, the names that come to mind, obviously, Mike Breen for basketball is the standard in my mind. And obviously we've watched so many games that he's called over the years. Ian Eagle, the same thing, doing the Brooklyn Nets games. Howie Rose obviously was the voice of the Islanders when I was growing up, and always watched as many games as possible and took some things from him. As far as like the anchoring side, I remember my parents were always NBC people, so I watched Len Berman a lot when he was on NBC when I was growing up. But it was never a couple. I'm just like thinking of guys on ESPN like John Buccigross and Stuart Scott, right? But I can't say that I was like, oh, I want to be Stuart Scott, right? Or I want to be Mike Breen. It was just kind of a combination of all those guys that, hey, I enjoyed watching them, and it kept me. I guess it just kind of sparked an interest in me to do this.
Well, I was going to say, in the end, you've got to be yourself, right?
Right. And I tell the kids that I teach that a lot. I mean, you have your own personality. I mean, we do a lot of in my classes now because it's become so popular. It's not my favorite thing and not really my personality, but the kids love it. The students love it, is these debate shows, right? That they're on TV all the time now. I tell all these kids, like, okay, Stephen A may be the person that you look up to and the most interesting, but you're not Stephen A. Find your own way about it. There's a reason why Stephen A is Stephen A and why he's so good at what he does.
You've experienced so much, or I should say you experienced so much in your 4 years at Hofstra. Is there one specific game that you called or place that you went during your time? Taking away the experience with the Islanders, we'll get to the Islanders in a minute, but is there one specific Hofstra Pride game or one experience with Hofstra that you remember most vividly of all the rest?
There are a couple. So my sophomore year was Charles Jenkins' senior year, one of the best players in Hofstra program history. And he was, obviously awesome. And I got to know him a little bit, which was great. But the game he broke the all-time scoring record, I believe it was against Drexel, if I remember right, in 2011. The building was sold out, and it was just like, the first time I had seen the MAC at Hofstra sold out like that. We did an on-site pregame show, which I did. I didn't call the game because, again, I was just a sophomore at the time, but I was part of the on-site pregame show. The game was sold out. It was just like electric in the building, and that's one of the things that still stands out to this day. And just kind of all the travel that I was able to do, that I was lucky enough to be able to do. So many great trips with both Hofstra men's and women's basketball. I went to Cancun with the women's team. I went to San Diego with the women's team for a tournament. Obviously, all the different CAA schools that I went to. And, being able to build, the friendships with the people, my friends at WRHU, people in the athletic department, players and coaches on the team. I see a good comment. My good friend Stephen Gorchov at Hofstra, who whooped me in mini golf in Cancun. So just memories like that. We're all fun.
As I'll just put the comment up here that his favorite memory might be mini golfing.
He beat me pretty good. Me and Anthony Barrett in Cancun. Before Steve's comment, I was going to mention to you that he was our first episode, or I should say my first episode in hosting the interview series. And when I promoted your interview, he said that you were the real GOAT. So how did you take to that? Well, so he is, obviously we know Steven loves the term GOAT, and he is the true GOAT. So it is an honor to be on the show after he was the first guest. And I love that you have been able to, highlight people like Steven and other SIDs in the business who do so much great work and don't get recognized. Steven, yourself, it's a thankless job sometimes, but obviously us broadcasters really appreciate it. So
no, and I mean, just looking back on our history together, Kevin, I mean, I remember when you were a student at Hofstra and you walked into my office at Malloy, and almost 10 years later, look where you are now. So it's just been great. I mean, I appreciate your comment, but also it's just been great, Kevin, to watch you as well grow into the business and see you become the person you are today. It really is. So eventually you're named sports director at WRHU. And then at that same time, when this happens, you receive the opportunity to really pursue another dream, which was you got to work as a color analyst for one of your favorite childhood sports team, being the New York Islanders. WRHU still today, and even when you were a student at Hofstra, carries the Islander games on radio. And you spent 3 seasons in that capacity. So you got to travel for games. I remember you telling me way back when that you got to go up to Winnipeg and go north of the border. And in the end, you concluded it with a trip you got to go to Pittsburgh and work the playoffs. So what did that entire, and I know I'm speaking for the excitement for you a little bit here, but what did that entire experience mean to you?
It means a lot. I mean, it's funny looking back on it now, these almost 8 years out of college now. I feel very old saying that. But, looking back on it now, because it's just kind of, I used to do this. Like, talking to, I remember, first time I brought it up to my in-laws, when I was dating my wife, or my now wife, and they were like, didn't really believe. Like, what do you mean you used to be the, radio color analyst for the Islanders? And I was like, yeah, I went to Toronto, Winnipeg, you mentioned it. A lot of different road cities, went to Pittsburgh for the playoffs. Like, people just don't really believe that was an opportunity for a 20, 21-year-old kid like that. So it's kind of weird to look back at and think about it. And that, with the knowledge that obviously I've accrued over the last 8 years, like, oh man, I wish I had this knowledge then, and how much better of a job I would have done with that opportunity. But just to, that was obviously one of my dreams growing up, was to be able to call a game at the Coliseum. And I got to call multiple games and playoff games. And I think it was, in the moment, it was a lot of, me just being focused on being as professional as possible and doing as good of a job as I could. And, not taking advantage of any opportunity, not trying to be like, hey, I'm I got a chance to be in the Islander locker room and feel really cool about it. Like, no, I was there to do a job, and I was there to interview with players, and there to learn about the broadcast. And obviously Chris King, the great, radio voice of the Islanders, was so important in that, because he was able to, teach us, but also be our friend at the same time. Be, a friend and a mentor, but also, give us these little nuances and things to pick up on. And, all in all, it was, looking back on it, it's still kind of hard to believe that I had that experience for a couple of years, and being, kind of capping it off my senior year with the first time they had made the playoffs in 6 years, which felt like a lot longer than 6 years, but it was only 6 years at that point. And it felt, like that game. I still remember Game 3 at the Coliseum against Pittsburgh in 2013. If there's any Islander fans watching that remember that game, and just feeling like the roof was going to blow off. They scored 2 goals early. And just being like, wow, like, I have to pinch myself that I'm here, and, and not also, not get too excited, because I have to be on the air and have a job, to do. So, it was a lot of fun.
Though, when you look back to last year, and, I forgot which overtime game it was, where RHU had the video cam feed of the color analyst at the time, jumping when the Islanders had scored the game.
Yeah.
Maybe that might've been you 7-8 years ago.
Well, I've seen, I have some funny, Chris King stories. You saw his emotional reaction last year on camera, and I've saw some good ones from Kinger during my time with him. No, it was just an unbelievable, and you see the smile on my face talking about it. Again, it's not something that I really, think about now, and then just to be able to think back, like, oh, that was really cool. Like, I had that opportunity, and there's, as much as the team has changed over, you think about, there were a couple guys that were on the team then that are still on the team now that were, kids basically my age, like, the Josh Baileys, Matt Martin, Casey Cizikises. Trying to think if there was anybody else. Brock Nelson played 1 game in that playoff series. So there are a couple guys that are still around on the team that, talking to in the locker room. Then, when they were 22, 23, just like I was, and now they're the vets on the team.
Kevin, it seems like this show has taken a little bit of an Islanders turn, and I know you My co-host on the Primetime Rundown, Joey Jarzinka, who also handles some interviews here on the interview series, is a fellow diehard Islander fan like yourself. And he put up a comment saying, how about game 4 in the 6-goal game that year? So.
Yeah, that was the only game they won at the Coliseum, which was, again, just all 3 games were really electric. And I remember that feeling, it was kind of a lot of unknown. They lost game 6 that year. And Brooks Orpik off the post in overtime. I could feel like I can recount every detail of the series, and not just even from broadcasting it. But I remember that feeling because we were unsure about what was kind of going on, because we had to travel back to Pittsburgh that night because it was going to be a back-to-back. And I was traveling with Kinger and the team, which was a cool experience, obviously, but just kind of being like on the unknown. Do we have to go back to Pittsburgh? What's the situation like? And then they scored, and there was like a tad bit of me of like, that was relieved. That wasn't like craziness of the travel. And then the disappointment of obviously them losing kicked into. But just all great memories.
It just must have been some experience. Look, and I know you've been to playoff games as a fan, but to be there and try to be there, even though you're doing a job, but also to be an unbiased individual as an Islander fan. I'm sure at certain points it might present its challenges, though.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
I was going to ask you about what type of, and you had already followed up on that question about how Chris King was such a mentor to you and what he meant to you from just learning from him and all these simple little nuances. But is there a certain memory or one special memory with Kinger that stands out to you?
I think just getting to know him in more than just, a broadcaster level, becoming friends with him on a personal level. Obviously, it's, I could be, again, just kind of like hanging out and recounting memories of, the teams that I was growing up. I mean, I've said this to Kinger a bunch of times, and he laughs at me, but when I was a kid, again, this is just kind of like the broadcasting thing in me. When I was a kid, when I would go to the games, I would always say to my dad, we have to run out after the game's over to get in the car to listen to Chris King on the postgame show. Because at the time he hosted the pre and postgame show, and he would laugh thinking about it. Or sometimes we'd go down and they would have a player come out in the bar area, whatever it was called at that time. It had so many different names, but the bar area in the basement of the Coliseum, we go over and watch him interview the player, and Kinger laughs about that. But, having that, memory, and then being able to walk Doolin's pub. There we go. Yep. In the Coliseum. Having that, memory growing up of being like this, and then getting a chance to work with them and obviously be friends with them these years later. It's, it's fun.
So sticking kind of the final point here to discuss with Hofstra is you earned the honor, a real distinct honor, of being named the runner-up for the Jim Nantz Award as a senior, which is presented to the top collegiate sportscaster in the country. So to receive this honor, named also after a legendary broadcaster in the business today, what did that mean to you?
It meant a lot. I mean, obviously was validation of all of the work and time that I put in while I was at Hofstra. It was something that, looking back on, I probably put too much effort and time into thinking about. Just wanting to kind of be known by other people that, what I was doing. And the year before, I remember being an honorable mention. And it was just something that we took a lot of pride in, within the sports department at Hofstra, how many people, and it was, for whatever reason, we kind of created the narrative in our head that we had this like underdog mentality, that, we weren't Syracuse or Fordham or Missouri or Arizona State, name your great broadcasting school, but we had, we were pumping out good broadcasters. And with the fact that we put, a couple of people on the list the years prior, I think it was, only came out, they only started doing it, a couple of years before I ended up finishing second. And then that year, we had 4 people from Hofstra end up on the list: myself, Rob Joyce, Mike Morabito, and Mike Sullivan. And that was, not even as much as me finishing second, but the fact that there was 4 of us, and we had kind of like, felt like we had achieved something as a group, that all 4 of us were able to, get ourselves on the list and be among the top, collegiate broadcasters in the country. It was, like I said, it was validation of like that hard work that we put in, and I guess I was kind of fooled into thinking that like, oh, well, now that I'm, number 2 on this list, people are just going to come calling me. That didn't happen. But it was, it was just a cool, again, it's just a cool way to say, all of this work that you put in while you were there, and, you are good enough to go get a job and work in this industry, and all this stuff wasn't for nothing.
And now to add to your point, Mike Sullivan is a fellow SID in the sports
he is.
industry, so working at Merrimack. On top of receiving that honor, you were also named the top broadcaster at the radio station at WRHU, and that's an award named for such a legendary broadcaster around these parts, and Ed Ingles. I know you've met him. I've met him as well, and we unfortunately lost him last March at the age of 87. He's just one of the real great guys in our business. Kevin, can you speak about how he was a mentor to you and how you look back on your friendship with him so many years later?
I mean, Ed was everything to all of us at WRHU. I mean, he did so much and it's something that I still am amazed, every time that, like I said, when I, teach my students, try to figure out how he was able to be so positive and so encouraging, but also give you the feedback and the criticism that you needed at the same time. It was a skill that, I mean, it was unique to him, at least in anybody that I've come across, because he made you want to go and get better and do more things and feel good about yourself, while also telling you what you did wrong, what you needed to get better at. And I think that was something that we all kind of needed. And he was just like, he was like a grandpa, to all of us, but in a way that he told us what we needed to get better at. I mean, that's really the best way that I could put it, that he was able to, be the friend, and also he could sit down, and if you needed to be disciplined, or somebody in the department needed to be disciplined, that he was able to do that. And you really just learned so much, really kind of almost via osmosis from him, just the stories that he told from, coming through the business. And, the most valuable thing that I think everybody realized as you got older, I mean, you obviously looked up to him and what he did in his career and everything that he was teaching you, but I think you didn't realize it until you got to be a senior and you were about to graduate, that when you became one of his guys, right, and you were one of the top, achieving people, he was so well respected, and still is so well respected by so many people in the industry, and he could make a phone call for you to anybody who would then take you seriously because you were one of Ed's guys. And I was, able to, parlay a couple of opportunities for myself out of that, and I don't think you realized it as much when you were kind of in it and just trying to, improve and work as hard as possible and get these opportunities and all that stuff. And then it was like, oh, right, because I've put in the work and he knows that I can handle this, he's going to be able to put in a call for me. And all of these people that, are big wigs in the industry looked up to Ed when they were growing up, because that's how much of a legend he was. So I really owe so much to him. It's really unfortunate that we weren't able to do anything to kind of say goodbye to him because of the pandemic, which, I still hope we were able to do something and come together, all of the people that have come through and have had, been influenced by Ed in their careers and in their life. He taught life stories too. It wasn't just about broadcasting. So I do hope we get to do that at some point soon.
So you've mentioned it a couple of times already, or at least alluded to it. And you said how much Ed has done for you. Now you've been giving back. Can you speak a little bit about the Journalism and Broadcasting Institute that you handle at Hofstra today?
Yeah, so it was Ed's baby, really. He started, it was a summer sportscasting camp. He started when he first got to Hofstra. And basically it was a 1-week camp where kids would come through and learn about broadcasting for a week. And how I got started doing it was, again, being the sports director at WRHU and being one of the guys who was there over the summer. Ed asked me my sophomore year, right after my sophomore year, could I come and help out for the week? And basically that involved recording. Like he would give the kids critique on stuff, and then I would take them into the studio and record. Or they would be doing their play-by-play, and I would sit there and listen to them and give a little bit of feedback as they did their play-by-play and record it. And then I went back, the next summer to do it and developed a relationship with all the people there, and that just became kind of part of the routine. And then as Ed started to phase his way out of it, as he's took a step back in his career, myself and Keith Irizarry kind of, we were there and helping out, and we're able to kind of take over the lead of it. And then we developed the program from what it was to now we have 20 plus courses that run throughout the year. Obviously now we're doing it on Zoom, which hasn't been that bad of a transition, but we moved to a different building at Hofstra, have our own studios instead of using the School of Communication studios. So we're kind of able to be self-contained any time of the year, even when there are students at Hofstra using the studios at WRHU. We have our own space to bring students in, and we've developed a certificate program where if you take a certain amount of classes, you get a certificate, which look great on your college resume. So really just kind of advanced the program and added more things that we topics and all that stuff. And basically I just really enjoy it. Really enjoy getting a chance to work with kids that are passionate about this and passionate about sports, and kind of honing that passion and improving their skills. And like I said before, they get so much of a jump start. And now we've been doing it long enough that we have kids that came to our program in high school, went through college, and are now working in the industry as professionals. And that's really cool to see that they, got our start with us, and we're kind of those people that, mentored them throughout the process.
And I've seen you advertise it every summer, and it's great to see some of the kids that come out of that program. And that being said, just want to kind of give you a chance to make a plug here for it a little bit. When is it held? Who can come be a part, and what can they expect from it?
Yeah, so like I said, we run year round now. We have courses, running as we speak on Zoom. Like I said, ce.hofstra.edu/sportsjournalism is the website. You follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and we try to post. It's myself or Dan Savarino, who's one of our instructors as well. The two of us, we run the social media as well, so we do our best to post stuff when we got stuff going on. Dan's a little bit better at it than I am, but and it's for kids 12 to 18 who have an interest in this. And I always tell parents or kids themselves that are interested, if you have a little bit of an inkling that you might want to do this, it's great to get started before you go to college and realize you don't, if you don't want to do it. And if you don't, that's okay. You got experience learning how to be a better public speaker and better improve your communication skills. And if you do, you get a chance to, hone these skills and get a head start before you go to college and all these other kids that want to do it. So I think it's a win-win in a lot, and we have a lot of fun. We don't just, grind, work, and read textbooks. I mean, we play games too. We try to make it as fun as possible, and we get a chance to talk about sports. And I think that, especially now in this pandemic world where people don't always have that same interaction, you get a chance to talk to other people that you don't know and talk about sports and argue and debate. And I think that's, that's a fun part of it too.
Seems like a dream and a win-win for whoever comes to the camp. Unfortunately, you can't have it so much in person now as much as we all still have to have it virtually. Kevin, for you and Dan as well, but how rewarding is it for the two of you now to be able to give back to this younger generation and to see the younger generation thrive and lead the way to follow you?
Yeah, it's awesome. Like I said, and now having kids that have come through and are working in the industry or doing things in college, right, and getting the recognition and knowing that they got kind of their start and learned stuff from us, it means a lot. Having kids ask us for advice, outside of class, how to put together a reel and how to, go about applying this for college or ask for a letter of recommendations. I mean, that's what you kind of, you do it for, to see the improvement in them and to have the, the reward, as you said, and just stealing your word, but to have the reward of knowing that you made an impact in their life. I mean, that's really what at the end of the day, what it's about, and that you help them get closer to achieving, their dreams, if that is their dream. So I think that's, that's the part. It's probably, I don't know if it's my favorite one of my jobs, but it's probably, from that perspective, I enjoy it the most, because when you get, a group of students that are really good and then they go on and do good things, it puts a smile on your face.
Very promising and as I said, very rewarding indeed. For you, as someone coming up and just graduating out of college, you officially, for yourself on a full-time role, just broke into the business in 2014 as a sports anchor for 1010 Wins. So a nationally renowned radio station. Can you talk about what it means for you to get that first opportunity where you did at 1010?
Yeah. So, like I said, it was kind of being able to, through Ed, who, like I said, was able to open some doors for me when I was getting out of college. So before I even got to 1010, I started working at CBS Sports Radio, where I'm still working now as an anchor for them. Right. About 6 months after college, I got hired there, and that, Ed had put me in touch with the person who was at the time the hiring manager at 1010. And I remember sending a demo like right after college, one of my college demos, and like, hey, keep in touch. We have nothing open right now. And then after I got the job at CBS, updating my demo, staying in touch, they had a position open, and I was doing, starting about a year or so after college, was doing weekend mornings, which I did for 3 years, which was not great for my sleep schedule, or social life, but was great for the experience of it. I mean, getting a chance to be on an iconic radio station twice a week in the morning, and just, not many people get a chance to, kind of start out there, if you will. But I think it was a credit to the stuff that I did in school that I was able to be ready for that kind of opportunity. And then to, have a chance, like I said, to just be on a station like that and have so many people hear me, every weekend. It was, it kind of paved the way, I guess, for all the other opportunities that I've gotten, and really, kind of helped me establish myself.
Were those 4 a.m. starts for you in the mornings, or?
So it was wake up at 3, leave, still living with my parents at the time, of course. So leave Levittown at about 3:30 and get into the city at like 4:15. And the shift started at 5. I'd start writing my scripts when I got in at 4:15, and then it was 5 to noon, and then would drive home and get home. And in the summer, the beach traffic was ridiculous at noon. So drive home, sometimes not get home till 1:30, 2 o'clock, and then there were a lot of times that I would go from there, and I would go to News 12, and work at News 12, and then sleep for 3 hours and drive back into the city and go to 1010 again. Again, not great for my sleep schedule, but it was the kind of the grind that I had to do to establish myself. So, luckily I don't have to do that every weekend anymore, but there were times where I did that. I was one time I did it 4 days in a row, where I worked morning, night, morning, night, morning, night, morning, night. And by the night, and I was on TV too, which is like insane. I don't know how I didn't look so sleepy. But by the night of the 4th time, I was like, basically seeing stars. I wouldn't recommend doing 4 straight 20-hour days. And if you do it out there, if anybody out there does that for their job, more power to you, because wow, not fun.
I was going to say, the pride of being 22, 23 years.
Exactly. Right.
Just the drive. You said it yourself, the ability to be part of this iconic station, being able to break through at such a young age there. You had the opportunity to cover a few US Opens, a couple of New York City marathons, but most importantly, for someone, these opportunities don't just always come up for everyone, but you had the opportunity to know Ed and work through it. But how did you finally find a way just to break through what is really just a dog-eat-dog business in the broadcast journalism world?
That's a good question. There's no, I feel like it's easy to say like, oh, I had this master plan and I did this and this email led to this. I didn't really have a master plan. Like, still to this day, sometimes I try to figure out, okay, like, what is it? Like, what is the dream job? Like, I never went into this with one specific dream job. As much as I love the Islanders, my dream job was not be play-by-play announcer for the Islanders, and that's the only thing I want to do. It was just kind of be a sportscaster. So to me, it was whatever opportunity that I could get. And, and similar to choosing Hofstra and wanting to stay home, as I'm just a homebody type of person, I didn't really want to. I mean, a lot of people go to other markets, to get experience. I didn't want to move away. I wanted to stay in New York if I could. And I was lucky enough to be able to do so. And it kind of just went from there. Like, well, heck, okay, I want to stay here, whatever opportunities that I could get. Was obviously doing the games, with you at Malloy's, at Adelphi, at all the different local schools, and was working at News 12. And, like I said, just kind of whatever I could get. And, and it's turned into what it's turned into.
Now, I know this question wasn't on the prompt, but I want to ask it anyway, just to throw in a little bit of a screwball out here, Kev. Hope that's okay.
Yeah.
You've done both. I mean, and you did both in college as well. You've worked the radio side. You've also worked the TV side. Do you have a preference on one or the other?
They're different. They're different where, like, so for example, I actually did one of those dreaded doubles yesterday, but a little bit different because I was working from home for radio, but I did my, WFAN radio shift in the morning from home. And then I went to News 12 where on the radio side, I'm writing, you're doing a lot of these, multiple updates an hour, writing scripts, refreshing them, playing sound. Like it's a little bit more work where, TV, you're doing, a couple minute sportscast, and it's like, oh, I have to do 2 of these where I have to do 25 in the morning on radio. So it's a little bit easier from that perspective, but obviously a little bit more goes into it. You got to look nice. I don't know. I really don't know if I have a preference. I enjoy them both for different reasons.
You had already mentioned you've done some work for News 12 Long Island, CBS Sports Radio, WFAN, also WCBS 880. We've mentioned again and again all these renowned radio stations in one of the sports capitals of the world, no less. Have you at any point during your path along this way, have you ever found it intimidating?
Multiple times, mostly when it comes to like working normal hours, if that makes sense. So I have, I've spent a lot of, as you're working your way up, when you get your foot in the door, you're not exactly handed the, 9 to 5 afternoon Minko shift on the fan, right? You got to work your way up. So, working a lot of weekends, a lot of early mornings, as I said, a lot of late nights, becoming friendly with a lot of those people, but not really knowing, the regulars that everybody else knows and listens to on the radio, all the time. And then getting a chance like, okay, now you're going to fill in for Minko, right? Like the first time you're filling in for Minko. Oh man, was I as nervous as possible? Or even like I would go in, when I first started doing updates for the fan and would get the night shift, which, the first update was at 6:00. So it was that last update on Mike's show. We all know who Mike is, right? I don't need to. So and that was at the time.
Question, but you're already leading into it. So.
Well, I know you're going to. I know you're going to ask about the 20 questions with Mike, which we'll get to. But he, at that time, when I think that was after he left, and I started working there in 2018. So about 3 years ago now. So I guess that was after he retired for the first time and came back. I don't really remember the timeline, but he was working from home a lot. So I'd come in at 4:00 and know I'd have to do that update, and I would always peek in to see if he was there because I was, intimidated for him to be sitting there while I was doing my update. That's obviously intimidating. And then I'd kind of take a sigh of relief, like, okay, he's home today. I don't have to have that like nerve of him staring at me while I was doing my update. And I think it was only like once or twice I ended up, obviously he was just nice and said hello. He's not nearly as intimidating as you kind of built him up to be in your head. But yeah, that's definitely one that sticks out.
Well, to follow up on that, you had mentioned something about 20 questions with Mike. And the funny thing is on a personal note, I was driving home from work the day that this happened, and I hear Mike talking to, we're here with Kevin Dexter, and he's asking you all these different questions about Hofstra and about your rise into the business. What was that like for you at that point? I'm sure it had to have been nerve.
Yeah. Well, so I was, I don't remember how long I was doing updates there at the fan, but I remember that was the first time I did the Minko afternoon shift. Now I had done a bunch of the shifts, like I said, that started at the 6 p.m., but I hadn't, met him, and he was actually at home that day, which I don't know if people realize. But I did, whatever, the Joe and Evan at the time obviously were on in the afternoon, did their show. And I just remember being super nervous because I was there. And again, I didn't really know a lot of those people. I knew all the people on the weekends or at night, didn't know a lot of the people that were there in the afternoon. And went into studio, did, I guess it was the 2:00 update. Yeah, his show started at 2. Did the 2:00 update. I came out and there's a speaker in the WFAN newsroom that obviously plays the programming that's going on in the station. So I finished the update. I come out. I thought it was fine. I mean, obviously I knew I was nervous. I don't know if I sounded nervous on the air, but I did. It was fine. And I come out and I hear on the speaker in the newsroom, Mike talking about me, but in a way where he was kind of making fun of Minko for not being there. John Minko, great guy, by the way.
Yes. Yes.
Great guy. But making fun of Minko, and he was like, "Oh, Mike, I guess, even though I had done that one update on his show, however many times, my name didn't really register with him, which is not a surprise. Not that I expected it to." And he was like, "What are they just pulling people off the street to film Minko's shift now?" So he was making a joke about it at the top of that update. And like I said, I didn't really know at that point, like his producers. You know, it was like kind of a quick introduction.
Well, Monzo, right?
Right, Monzo, yeah, and Chris McMonagle, who, you know, I've been able to get to know a little bit, but I don't really know them. They didn't really know me, you know, from me just doing, you know, like I said, nights and weekends. So he was asking them, "Oh, what do you know about him?" And they were like, "We don't know much about him." So yeah, that was a funny moment. So he was asking them, and then he was like, "Okay, well, I got to find out more about him." So I went in studio at like 2:55 or whatever before the update. And Monzo said to me in my ear, he's like, "Mike's going to want to talk to you here, just FYI." So then I got super nervous. Heart started, you know, like the Tiger Woods PGA Tour, you know, heartbeat starts going. And we basically played 20 questions where he asked me everything about myself for, I don't know, 5 minutes or so. But it was, I was very nervous, but I was able to kind of hold it together. And then, you know, not that, like I said, we only had a couple of minor interactions in person, but I guess I got his stamp of approval for my answers. So he didn't make fun of me or anything, or rib me on the air, and it was good. And yeah.
So you survived the afternoon drive, and you told me that Mike Francesa is not as intimidating as he looks. So is it more Joe and Evan that were intimidating? Steve Summers that was intimidating?
But Steve's great. Steve is not intimidating. Steve is a super nice guy. No, I think it's just, like I said, it's just like now, you know, realizing you're always, you know, I don't really think about it as much on a weekend. You're like, oh, there's so many people that are listening to me right now, right? There's so many people, you know, I don't think about it as much. But then when you're there in the afternoon, you're like, there are so many people that are listening to me right now because you're on with Mike or, you know, Joe and Evan or whoever. So those are the moments that it kind of hits you, and I still get a little nervous for.
So while you've been doing all this anchoring and News 12, 660, whatever it may be, you know, you still had all this experience as a play-by-play announcer, and you would get your fix, you know, working the local schools, sometimes for me as well, even currently at Adelphi and working at LIU, working at Malloy. But you got your first professional gig in the play-by-play business with where you are today, when the Brooklyn Nets had announced that they were going to start a developmental team in the NBA G League, the Long Island Nets, a position that you have held ever since their inaugural season. So when this opportunity finally arose for you, what did it mean to you, especially to be associated as well with a sport that you've had such a long appreciation for?
It was, you know, this was one of the, you know, opportunities that was like, okay, you know, I didn't know it existed, but was like, okay, that's what I want that job. I remember seeing that they were, you know, announced the team was coming to the Coliseum, and, you know, thinking about it, but trying to, you know, figure out how do I get myself in the right position to be there. But there's not, you know, in broadcasting, it's kind of funny. People who are not in broadcasting probably don't realize, you know, a lot of jobs, you're not like, hey, I'm going to, you know, click this and apply, and they're going to call me back and I'm going to go for an interview. You know, it's kind of who, you know, being in the right place at the right time to get the opportunities. And again, through Hofstra, my boss, Alton Bird at the Long Island Nets, knew about Hofstra's relationship with the Islanders, as we talked about, and went to speak with John Mullen, WRHU, one of the guys who runs WRHU, about doing a partnership for them. And then, you know, John sent me a long note that day. I would think I was 2 years out of school at that point, and was like, hey, they're looking for a play-by-play announcer. I recommended you. You're perfect for this. You know, sent them everything that I had done. And at that point, as you mentioned, you know, obviously I had the experience at Hofstra, but I was working on News 12 on the air. I was working in the city at, you know, 1010 Wins on the air. And, you know, I was what they were looking for, and someone that was young, that could grow with the team and, you know, kind of be that developmental voice, if you will, but also had New York City media experience and, you know, Long Island media experience, and someone who was established. So I kind of checked all the boxes, and was able to, you know, went in for an interview, got the job, and it's been awesome ever since to kind of have that day-to-day experience of being with the team and seeing them grow. To go to the G League finals a couple of years ago was awesome. And, you know, just kind of see the organization grow as it has over the last couple of years. And obviously hope once this pandemic is over, it still continues to grow. And, you know, more people know about the Nets and find out about the Nets and come and realize, you know, how enjoyable the games can be, you know, for families to come check out.
And And Kevin, I've known you for so long. You're such a humble human being. But what was it like for you to receive such a recommendation for a position like that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've never really thought about it. It's just kind of putting yourself in position. I mean, that's one of the pieces of advice I would give to people is just, if you work hard and you do the right things, you'll eventually have those opportunities, and you have to have faith that the opportunities will come if you do the right thing. I tell myself that now to this day, if I get frustrated about something, just keep doing what you're doing, and you have to have faith that it's gonna, trust the process, to steal a line from Joel Embiid, if you will. So yeah, I never really thought about like, oh wow, I got that recommendation. It was just like, I worked hard and I felt like I could do the job, and I feel like I've done a pretty good job and I really enjoy it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily one thing, that I got that recommendation. It was just, this is a job that obviously that I wanted, and I've enjoyed having.
Excited about Kyrie, Harden, and Durant, or what?
I'm mixed about it. I'm definitely a little bit mixed about it. I don't know how they'll fit together. Obviously, I hope it succeeds for the organization. I guess you can look at it from the side of you can do anything you can do to get a player like James Harden, you got to do. Obviously, there's some downfall because they gave up a lot of draft picks and they gave up good young talent. Really like Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, guys that I really, really enjoyed watching those Brooklyn teams a couple of years ago that were kind of scrapping their way through. The D'Angelo Russell team was really fun to watch the year he was there. Just kind of guys that came through our program in Long Island and have made an impact, and moved on and moved up and been able to play at the NBA level. So I think this, in a way, is actually even good for that, because they're going to need role players, and the G League is going to become, under even more of a microscope, and it might create an opportunity for more guys that we have on Long Island, which would be awesome. So I guess we'll see how it pans out. But if they win a championship, it's all worth it. So I guess that's the goal, and if they got closer to doing that, by having those three guys, it's certainly worth it.
I would say with the Harden trade, it's become championship or bust,
yeah,
or at least it feels that way.
Yeah.
But retracing back to your time so far with the Long Island Nets at the Coliseum, I'm sure you've had a lot of great moments, even from your first game to your last. And unfortunately, even though there won't be any G League season this year on Long Island, all the games will take place down in Disney at the Bubble. I'm sure, as someone both of us who work for the Long Island Nets in different capacities, but for yourself to be able to cover the team 2 seasons ago when they had won a G League Eastern Conference championship and had made it to the NBA G League Finals, and just to experience that whole season, that must have been something else for you.
Oh, it was so much fun to kind of see that organically build. Knew we had a good team, and from just talking to people, around the team. Knew they were good, knew some of the players, and the G League's, interesting because, you have the guys who are big name guys in college who maybe fall through the cracks in the NBA, and about because you've seen them play and you've heard about them. And then there are some guys that, you don't know as much about. The perfect example, some of the big names on the team that year, you had Theo Pinson, who obviously people knew from North Carolina, won a national championship, was one of the two-way players between Brooklyn and Long Island. You had John and Musa, who was a first-round pick, right? But then you had a guy like Jordan McLaughlin, played at USC, had a great career at USC. Now he's on a two-way deal with Minnesota, and people, I didn't know as much about him, right? I hadn't watched much USC, and he was such a key part of the team. And guys that come from different backgrounds. So like I said, knew we had a good team, and then just to kind of have that build, and okay, now they're going to make the playoffs for the first time, and that was exciting. And then they're going to have a home playoff game, right? And then going into the Eastern Conference final and winning that game and going, unfortunately they fell short in the finals, but just the whole ride and seeing people on Long Island kind of figure it out and see people come to the Coliseum and the crowd get loud and get into it. That was really cool to kind of go from the ground up to when there was literally no fans the first season they played to now having people really care and come to the games was really cool.
Well, I do have a clip here I want to pull up for you here, Kevin, because I do want to discuss what your favorite moment might be, but I do want to bring up that clip from the Theo Pinson shot from the G League Eastern Conference Championship only a couple seasons ago. So here we go.
McLaughlin into Pinson for the three, and the win, it goes! Theo Pinson! They're going to put 0.4 of a second on the clock. So just enough time.
So for you, I mean, was there a better moment than that?
There was not. And you can hear a little bit too much excitement in my voice there. But yeah, I mean, that was, I guess like the culmination. And you think like that was, I remember putting down the headset. So that game was on ESPNU and just turning to Matt Estrich, my broadcast partner, and being like, I had so much fun. Probably a little bit too much fun. Like I said, I was probably a little bit too excited on that call. But like just the experience of, big time game. Obviously we had an ESPN truck there producing the game for us, game winning shot in overtime. The electricity, as I talked about in the building and people being there and cheering. It was just so much fun to look back and think I could still see the shot in my head. I obviously look back and I'm so critical of myself. I'm like, I would have done that differently. But, just kind of having that moment and having the team and be at center court with the championship trophy and stuff and being able to be there for it was awesome.
And for our viewers, of any of our viewers that might have actually had been at that game, for me at least, and I'm sure for you, that was probably the most electric for a Long Island Nets game that I had ever experienced.
For sure.
Two things that made that experience even better was the fact that they were trailing in the fourth quarter of that game as well, and I'll never forget the running dunk by Theo. And the fact that there were actually Brooklyn Nets in the house for the game. D'Angelo Russell was there. DeAndre Jordan was there.
Jared Dudley with his kid. I think Jared Dudley and his two kids or one kid was there.
Yeah. So, and I remember after the Pinson dunk, Russell standing up and trying to get the Coliseum going. So just the whole experience in itself was just fantastic. And, that leads us now to I should say what stopped the NBA G League season in its tracks last year, and what we've all been looking back on the last 10 months, which has been the onset of COVID-19. And even though most of my interviews, Kevin, have taken place with those that work in the collegiate athletics industry, that work as sports information directors, athletic communications professionals, and have had their seasons canceled. But you had your season canceled as well because you cover the Long Island Nets, and you work but you also work games on the college end, and just you yourself are a sports fan. So can you take me, I guess, from your own experience, how you endured the start of the pandemic and how it endures today for you?
It's obviously a lot of unknowns, as everybody knows. I was working the day that the world shut down. I was working at WFAN. I guess it was a Wednesday, right? That kind of everything shut down.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That the Jazz. Yeah, I was working the Minko shift, the afternoon shift, and I remember getting home and seeing my wife, who works at CBS News. I was at work, and then she called me as she works at night and was walking to work and called me and was like, "There's a positive case in the building. They're sending us home." And I was like, I remember talking about it. We kind of knew it was out there, but we didn't really realize how real it was. And I was like, "Oh, you can't just not go to work." She's like, "No, they told us not to come in." And then I remember she was working from home and getting home from work that night and seeing the Rudy Gobert and the NBA shutting down. And then I went to work the next day, and we didn't know to wear a mask or anything like that. Just kind of being conscious, like, "Oh, I'm going to wipe things down," and not really know what to do. And then it was just, like everybody else, like then that week, everything, you didn't come to work anymore, and trying to figure out how to work from home and just figuring out things to watch on Netflix, and there were no more sports. And it was just like a very weird existence for like, a month or two before things got a little bit more normal. It was definitely a hard couple months. But like I said, just trying to spin the positivity aspect into it as I always try to do it. Like I said in the beginning, like it gave me personally a lot more time to just hang out with my wife, make dinner while she was working. And, she was obviously very pregnant at the time, getting closer to our daughter being born. So that was, nice to be able to be around and, I think it made me at least, and I hope a lot of people kind of appreciate, sports. And I think I'll appreciate so much more going back into a building when there is fans, I obviously, turning it into the Coliseum. But being able to be in the building, whether it's for a Long Island Nets game or an Islander game where there are people there and like, the game is electric, like, that's something that we all kind of took for granted, I think. And now when it happens again, I think it will be that much more special to kind of have those experiences.
I think we all can't wait to get, for you as an Islander fan to get back into the Coliseum, or for when UBS Arena opens up at Belmont, and just to experience that first sporting event is, I just can't wait, especially in an area like New York that is just so passionate about their sports teams, or just anywhere really, where everyone is just so passionate about their sports franchises, and just can't wait to be there for an in-person sporting event. And me, myself, I just can't wait for an Adelphi event.
Oh yeah. Me too.
Yeah. I bet you can't. So for you, it just feels like this pandemic is never ending, but what for you have you learned most from this experience these last 10 months? Obviously I know you had the birth of your daughter, you bought a home, but most of all, like, just from the grand scheme of things, what have you learned the most these last 10 months?
I think more patience isn't the right word, but more just like appreciating the here and now and living in the moment. I think I've learned to appreciate more. Just the nature of my career, I could go from Long Island Nets one day to doing a game with you at Adelphi the next day, to working at News 12 the next day, then having a radio shift, and then back to doing another game at Adelphi, and then back to the Long Island Nets, and kind of like managing all of that and prepping for all of that, which can be a hassle, and just kind of thinking ahead. Okay, what's this? Oh, there's this game on that I want to watch this night. To now just like, hey, there's nothing to do. Let's find the show on Netflix. Let's watch a movie. I became a much better cook, right? Because I'm cooking a lot more. Like just kind of relaxing a little bit more. I think that was my biggest lesson. What I've learned is just to kind of appreciate those little moments, to just be able to relax, chill out, and not necessarily worry about what work is coming up next, or how do I figure out this situation, or have to research another stat for this Long Island Nets game. Just like, hey, I'm going to enjoy this time with my family. So
it's for myself included, it's made us really further appreciate our family time and just seeing people in general. I could tell you that there's family that I'm sure that we all haven't seen in months, and it's just been so difficult to experience it and witness it and be a part of it. And we just hope everyone's being safe. But, through all these years and all these experiences, Kevin, what do you, so many years later, still find to be your biggest challenge? Do you feel that you're still learning and growing in this business?
Of course. Absolutely. As you know, I have to give a shout out. As you know, I don't know exactly where he got this quote from, but one of my, if not, I shouldn't say one of my favorite athlete growing up was JJ Redick. Who has a great podcast. If anybody,
I've never listened.
Great podcast. Not just a good NBA player, but a great podcaster as well. I was always a huge fan of his when he played at Duke when I was growing up. Kind of who was my role model in terms of basketball was. But he had one of the quotes he said on his podcast that he kind of lives by, which I've put down on my phone to remind myself all the time. I don't remember exactly where he got it from. I want to say now that it comes to mind is from Bob Myers, the GM of the Golden State Warriors. But you've never arrived, you're always becoming. So I hope I attributed that right. I don't know if it was Bob Myers. Maybe I don't quote me on that. But you've never arrived, you're always becoming, meaning that don't think you got a job or got an opportunity and think, okay, I'm here, I've arrived, I can stop working hard, or I can stop learning. You're always becoming something more. So that's one of the quotes that I try to always embody, and just think that, okay, yes, I have this, I've achieved this. Sometimes I think like, oh, have done a lot of cool things. Like, no, it's always about what's next and how do I learn and how do I keep getting better.
You had mentioned JJ Redick as a role model, but I wanted to actually jump back. There was a question I forgot to ask you. More so just for you, as you were enduring everything and leading up to what happened at COVID, it was also the same time you, as a Hofstra fan, got to see Hofstra win a Colonial Championship. So being the Hofstra alum, the Hofstra super fan that you are, what was it like for you just to watch that? I'm not trying to pour salt in the wound here or add insult to injury, because I did talk to Steve about it too. But for you, what was it like? As a fan, just to have that taken away from you?
Yeah, it was. It's bittersweet, right? Because you get a chance to see them after so many years finally win a conference championship. And I know how much it means to so many, Stephen and the coaching staff and, people that obviously I've gotten to know well over the years, how much it means to them and the whole university to finally get there. And I remember, being so excited for the game that night, and the year before they lost in the conference championship, but they had lost a couple of years prior in the conference championship. And there'd been so many, close calls, and being excited for the game and just being, so happy that night that they won. And so happy for the people involved in the program that they finally had that, chance to cut down the nets. And then just a couple of days later to see it, kind of taken away from them. But it's, you can't erase that. Yes, they didn't get a chance to play in the tournament. Yes, some person in wherever it was that was watching the game doesn't now know about Hofstra because they didn't see that game in the tournament that never happened, but they still won that championship. And I'm glad that they were able to at least get that much out of it and not, have the season cut short before they could even, win that conference championship.
Well said. You had mentioned JJ Redick as one of your biggest role models, but as you look back on all these years, growing up from wanting at 5 years old, wanting to put yourself in front of the television to where you see yourself now, who for you has been just your biggest inspiration in life to help you achieve the goals that you have today?
I mean, first and foremost, I have to say my parents, right? I was an only child. They obviously did so much for me to help me pursue whatever I wanted to, whether that was when I was, playing basketball growing up and I needed to go to an AAU travel tournament, right? Or I needed to be shuttled from a practice here or there or wherever. I mean, they always accommodated and, made sure to come to my games and, took me to wherever I needed to be, give up their weekends to go watch me play basketball and then at weeknights to watch me play basketball. And then when it came to, doing broadcasting, whatever I needed. I mean, there was, when I first got my job at 1010 Wins and I was going into the city at 3 a.m., and not really knowing, I was old enough that I certainly could have done it myself, but my dad, was it like, hey, I'm going to get up and I'm going to drive you to make sure that you just have to worry about going to work and not have to worry about, I'm going to stress about finding a parking spot in Manhattan and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So like just little things like that, they were, so supportive and being able to do. And then, I think there's just a couple, as far as, sports go, it's just, at the time, whatever was, your kind of your favorite player. Like I mentioned, JJ Redick was my favorite, basketball player when I was growing up, and that's the basketball player that I wanted to be. But, there are obviously people like I grew up, liking Duke, obviously from JJ Redick and Coach K. I've never met Coach K, but Coach K is somebody that, I look at and say, that's somebody that as a leader, right? I try to read books about him and learn about, different things that he brings and why he's so successful. And it's just one example. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I wouldn't say it's one, specific person that's like, hey, that's my role model. Just, people you try to think that are interesting or people that do a good job and try to learn about them and emulate things that they do.
There's a couple more comments here from Joey I want to get to before we close up shop for the night. But the first one was, what is your advice to those who live in the New York market, want to stay home, and want to pursue sportscasting in such a competitive market? Thoughts about this in a pandemic?
Well, the pandemic obviously changes things. I think the hardest part about it is finding a way to, get noticed, which, to be quite frank, I really do a terrible job at. I'm terrible at self-promotion on social media. I think, but that's, what you have to do in this day and age, find a way to have somebody who's important know who you are, and, develop whatever relationships you need to do in order to get where you're going to be. I mean, it might not be for an opening right now, but knowing that, okay, this is, this is something that might be down the line. Knowing this person might help down the line. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, the pandemic obviously changes things, but just doing as much as you can, whether it's doing a show like this, and interviewing people, or, doing your own play-by-play in front of the TV and putting the TV on mute if that's what you're interested in. I mean, whatever way you can do, anything you can do to get better is going to help. And like I said before, kind of trust the process, right, into whatever you think, will eventually pay off one day.
I'm sure for you and your wife as well, there's been a lot of trials and tribulations in being first-time parents, and also I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but dealing with the trials and tribulations of handling a newborn and eventually now a 6-month-old. But in the time that you guys do have off, whether it's after your daughter goes to bed or between when she goes to bed and when she wakes up, have you or your wife taken on any new hobbies, projects, any Netflix shows you'd recommend to binge while people are home over quarantine?
So our favorite, our favorite Netflix show was Schitt's Creek. If you've watched it.
I have, and huge fan. So.
I loved it. We absolutely loved it. It was one of probably the second or third show we watched in quarantine. She had heard about it from a friend, and I was like, "Oh, this looks funny," and it was phenomenal. Obviously, we watched a lot of different good stuff.
Your own date with the glasses. You're your own David Rose doppelganger, right?
Yeah. Well, these are the blue light glasses, which is again another quarantine thing because you spend so much time watching TV and on the computer. I bought these, best $20 purchase of my life. But yeah, I mean, watching shows, that was the show recommendation, and cooking a lot, I think, too. We don't make anything too fancy, but just learning some different things, and you move out and you buy a house, and then you're like, we moved into our apartment before our house, and you're like, oh, well, it's nice, you used to your mom cooking for you, right? And it's nice when you go home, and not that we can now, unfortunately, get that home cooking from our moms, either of our moms, but we're doing pretty good, I think.
We have one last question here from Joey, and you yourself being a Long Islander. Joey's from Cold Spring Harbor. You're from originally from Levittown, and he asked, as a native Long Islander, is it on Long Island or in Long Island? It's on
100%, on 100%. And I always laugh at it's really, I guess, specifically Islanders that it comes from, but you just think of people who are not native to here, or other broadcasters who are not native and they're in the island, right? And then when people finally pick up on it, athletes that are like, oh, now I've been here for a while and I hear these people say it, and I'm like, no, on the island. And then that means you're a true Long Islander once you know it's on the island. So yes, 100% on.
It's you have the family that sometimes when they're from Staten Island, are you in Staten Island or on Staten? No, you're on Long Island. So.
Yep. 100%.
Hopefully for all of our viewers, even though whether or not you agree with Kevin, that ends the debate. But Kevin, thank you so much. We really can't thank you enough for coming on and hanging out with us for the last hour or so. And we really appreciate you discussing all of your experiences and really enjoy the start of 2021.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. And good luck with this going forward. It's great.
Thank you so much, Ken. We're just going to ask you to hang around here for a minute. We just want to let everybody know what's coming up on the Eastern Observer. We've amped up your wrestling fix with our newest show, the Daily Wrestling News Show, with Minutes to Bell Time's Ryan Joy, every Monday through Thursday, starting at 10 a.m. right here on the Eastern Observer. And then tomorrow night, the guys are back. Al Carl, Tyler Adele, John Smith, Ryan Joy, John DeConti, and Gary Mahaffey for episode number 37 of the Essential Wrestling Podcast, with coverage beginning at 6 p.m. And then on Friday, join myself, Joey Jarzinka, and Rob DeLuca as we get you ready for Championship Sunday on the Primetime Rundown. That'll be this Friday, January 22nd at 6 p.m. for episode number 48 of the Primetime Rundown. And finally, as Wednesday kicks off hashtag Thank Your SID Week, COSIDA's annual recognition week, we will have the president of COSIDA and associate athletic director for strategic communications at Gallaudet University, Sam Atkinson, will be here to join me for the Primetime Rundown interview series next Monday, January 25th at 8 p.m. You will not want to miss it, and we hope we have you here for that one. And don't forget as well, ladies and gentlemen, that all programming can be seen on the I-95 Sports Network and Zingo Television Channel 198. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Ladies and gentlemen, one last time, for my special guest, Kevin Dexter, I'm Ian Schraier, and we'll see you next time.